January has been labeled as Hollywood's dumping ground, but as I stated in some of my movie reviews in January, for every little piece of garbage that spreads cinematic botulism, the month might reward us with one delicate treat for our endurance. Those moments tend to be rare, but for this time, instead of reviewing a movie in January like I usually do, whether it be The Terrible Night Swim or the forgettable The Beekeeper, I'm taking it upon myself to review a film that came out in 2014 in the month of filmmaking purgatory. Something that shared the same release month with odious abominations like The Legend of Hercules and Devil's Due. Something so ridiculous and preposterous, yet it made me keep coming back for more. Something one might call a guilty pleasure. We all have one when reviewing movies, and for today, it's time to grab your sacramental weapons and prepare for battle, because you and I are about to experience a film that contains a glorious marriage of bad and badass. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you...
I, Frankenstein.
Heretics and killers, evangelists and knights, fist by fist, Sacrilize our strife.
Mary Shelley's 1818 Gothic horror masterpiece of literature about the repercussions of playing God was the originator of the iconic and indeed my favorite movie monster, Frankenstein's monster. A creature stitched together, conceived, and ostracized by his own mad scientist creator, Victor Frankenstein, and has been reviled by anyone he has ever come into contact with or viewed from a distance. He was a very mysterious, intelligent, and to a degree, a sympathetic character that all he's ever wanted to do in his lifetime of being a undead superhuman corpse was to find companionship and for his own master to accept his existence. As years and generations gone by, Mary Shelley's novel has spawned countless reimaginings, retellings, and iterations of the famous story from a multitudinous amount of aspiring writers and directors, no matter how amazing or how inept the final product was. Enter Kevin Griveau. If you aren't familiar with this guy, he's been known for acting in and writing the original premise and screenplay accompanied by Lynn Wiseman and Danny McBride, not the one that killed the Halloween franchise, for what many know as the Underworld movies, a horror action series about the modern continuous conflict between vampires and lichens, which has a cult following to this very day. He's also known for becoming a comic book writer, manifesting graphic novels for Marvel, and generating 2 imprints of his own, one of which is Darkstorm Studios. One of his concepts from Darkstorm was supposed to be a comic miniseries called I, Frankenstein, which as of yet, as I recalled, hasn't come to fruition yet, and the only thing that remains is the promotional digital comic for the movie that we're reviewing right now. He sold the original screenplay in 2010 to Lakeshore Entertainment and was later on distributed by Lionsgate, opening in 2014 on, of all things, the feculent sewer of cinematic despair we all call January, and was blasted by scathing reviews from critics online and bombed at the box office. Now, with all that research aside, I just want to tell you, without dating myself for too long, I have a long history with this movie. I watched it around the time when I started reviewing movies before I even made videos for this channel. I haven't seen a single Underworld movie, nor have I even known about the comic's existence. I got first exposed to the movie seeing the poster on Rotten Tomatoes and seeing a TV spot for it, and not gonna lie, I was actually mildly intrigued. My favorite monster? In an action movie? Getting stuck in an ongoing war between 2 mythological factions? Sounds familiar to another franchise, but hey, it could be a grand old time at the movie theater. Well, after seeing the poor reviews and after watching it for the first time, I thought it was mediocre, it was a disappointment. On to the next film. But then, after multiple rewatches later, constantly finding things that I enjoyed about it, and after catching another glimpse of it as of today, this movie changed my life. Not gonna lie about this. Of all the guilty pleasures and the so bad it's good movies, from The Room to The Wicker Man with Nicolas Cage, Oogie Loves and The Big Balloon Adventure, Good Burger, Miami Connection, even Mortal Kombat Annihilation, I, Frankenstein, is perhaps the one movie that I have grown nostalgic for the most. Not just because it relates to a source that I really like, but because this movie felt like an action movie that was made for someone like me. And for some strange reason, it has grown on me. It became something that I've attached myself to for a decade, seeing it more than any movie that I have ever seen as a movie reviewer, and admittedly saying that it's a inspiration for this persona and for my channel outros and intros back in the mid-2010s. Now I want to make this crystal clear to you all watching. This movie's bad, but every time I watch this movie, never in 70 celestial galaxies does it cease to put a smile on my face. Even looking at this poster is enough to make me fall in love with it. Now with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's finally review this sucker. What this Citizen Kane caliber piece of celluloid brilliance casts off as a narrative is that the film, in its own unique way, begins where Mary Shelley's story ends. Terrified of what he has wrought to life, Victor Frankenstein tries to destroy his own creation. Unfortunately, Frankenstein's monster, Aaron Eckhart as the lead role, survives and enacts revenge by murdering Victor's wife after being rejected by him. After Victor dies of hypothermia trying to pursue the creature in the cold wilderness, the monster brings his body all the way to his family's cemetery to bury him. But all of a sudden, get ready for this, the monster is ambushed by demons from hell under the command of Prince Nibirius, played by Bill Nighy. Thankfully, he is rescued by a group of angelic shape-shifting guardians sent from heaven called the Gargoyle Order, led by Miranda Otto as Leonore, the Gargoyle Queen, and her commander Gideon, played by Jai, my muscles act better than I can, Courtney. After taking Adam, who they refer to Frankenstein's monster as, to their sanctuary, Leonore informs him that her and her kind have been waging an unseen war against the demon horde for centuries, and that Frankenstein's monster has caught himself in the middle of it. Despite hearing this information and a request from the Queen to stay, Adam doesn't really care about being a part of it and only wants to go his own way, attaining sacramental Kali sticks that the Order provides him with to protect himself with on his quest. 200 years later, the hunted has become the hunter, as Adam decides to not only slay any demon that comes his way, but to figure out Nibirius' true motivations of hunting him down. Turns out Nibirius wants the monster's corpse in Frankenstein's journal so that way he can replicate his experiments by reanimating an entire legion of satanic monstrosities to conquer the globe. This leaves the gargoyles with a difficult choice, despite having their temporary alliance with Adam, of destroying him for the sake of all mankind, rather than give him as an instrument to Nibirius' diabolically cliched scheme. So, with the help of Yvonne Strahovski, who plays a scientist named Tara, Adam must put an end to Nibirius' scheme and figure out his true purpose of existing. If there were two words that I would consider the plot of I, Frankenstein, the first word would be, in a critical sense, derivative. The sort of plot of the main character being caught in the middle of a war between good and evil doesn't really experiment with anything narratively or structurally new, and instead feels like a cavalcade of clustered, regurgitated ideas that have been dispensed from other material. Seeing how this is cultivated by the producers of the Underworld series, it feels like the producers basically took the premise of their cult classic franchise and essentially replaced the two opposing clans of vampires and lycans with gargoyles and demons, and basically shoved Frankenstein's monster in the mix. Which leads me to the second and the most appropriate word for this movie, goofy. Goofy in two different senses. One in which the premise is so ridiculous and stupidly amazing that you cannot believe the filmmaking display that is being present on your television screen. And the other in which the film has a lot of contrivances and plot holes bigger than Jim Sterling's splash in a cannonball competition. As we go deeper into the film's plot, it comes to our attention that Nibirius has been conducting experiments on bringing stitched animals back from the grave as way of practicing Frankenstein's methods. And it's all put in the action of 2 human scientists. I mean, the minute Zuriel finally delivers the journal and says that it's basically the kind of material we need to execute the plan, shouldn't he say, hey, boss, seeing how we have a demon working as a mortician, shouldn't we have, like, demon electrophysiologists as well, seeing how the entire plan rests on the shoulders of 2 gullible human scientists that we've hired for no particular reason? Nah, who am I kidding? You're right. I'm sure it's gonna be fine. What's the worst that can happen? Well, it leads to Adam sneaking inside of Wessex Industries, which is basically the demon base, in a way that makes Batman, who teleported into Gotham in The Dark Knight Rises, absolutely beside himself. This happens conveniently, I assure you, because the security in Wessex Industries, for some reason, operate about as well as the AI in The Last of Us. And it isn't until Adam decides to smash through a window and take Frankenstein's journal from Miranda from Mass Effect that the Men in Black agency and Davy Jones finally decide to corner Two-Face. But even that fails because just when they thought they can finally capture Adam himself, he jumps through another window and smashes through a vent, coincidentally on an oncoming train. Oh yeah, and he crashes through a lot of stuff in this movie. So hey, if you want to have fun and do a drinking game, take a shot how many times Frankenstein smashes through objects. But what is the biggest forehead slap of the entire screenplay is the third act. I mean, you couldn't have come up with a more contrived third act if you tried. You ready for this? Alright, let's go. So after Tara stitches up Adam after his fight with Zuriel and discovers the secrets in Frankenstein's journal, in a point where she knows from Adam that she is working with demons to create possessed corpses to destroy mankind, does she follow Adam to the gargoyle sanctuary, seeing how her life is in danger? You know the answer. Here's what she actually does. She does the irrational thing by calling her colleague to meet at the tram station, which results in a trap and have her being taken away to the demon headquarters. Tara, we can get your colleague as soon as the gargoyles are doing what they do against the demons. And you know that the whole thing is ludicrous when Adam even points out what the audience is thinking.
You shouldn't have done that.
Thank you!
In the next scene, Adam visits his frenemies and says this to Leonore after he's been released.
You lied to me.
About what? Hiding the journal from you? Last time I checked, the journal was inside Victor's jacket, and you didn't know that the book was even in there. Was it lying about why you were created? What's the lie exactly? Well, anyway, Adam explains what Nefarious is planning to do, and asks the gargoyles to take him and Tara somewhere else, so that way she can fulfill Frankenstein's promise by making Adam a companion. However, he never tells him where the demon base is. Only until he's being taken by the gargoyles somewhere else that he will tell them the location. Which is unfortunate because it then leads to Gideon giving the queen no choice but to have her go and kill Adam, just so that way he doesn't fall on the wrong hands of the demons despite really hating him since the very beginning, which then leads to Adam killing him to protect themselves, which then leads to the gargoyles resenting Adam and scouring the city to find him. All of that happens, and then Adam takes him to the location of the demon base. I wonder who could have told the gargoyles this valuable information this whole time to prevent all of this from happening. Along with one other person who knew that Adam was being ensnared by the devils in a dark alley, who killed a police officer, and followed one all the way to the rooftop, all the way to its evil facility, who unfortunately ended up dying. Who knows? The movie might have been over. But honestly, isn't it funny that the demons know the exact location of the gargoyles organization, but the gargoyles themselves don't know the same for the demons? So when Adam and the Gargoyle Order finally defeat one of the legions, Prince Nefarious, and his entire diabolical schemes, leaving a crumbling Wessex Industries to descend into the ninth circle of hell, how is the entire city not only going to respond to property damage, but a giant gaping hole in the ground? There will be news reports throughout the world, and given how loud the collapse was, there definitely would be witnesses. But you want to know the best part about that? At the beginning of the movie, Leonore explains this to Adam.
Humans think of us as mere decoration. They do not know, nor could they conceive of the brutal, unseen war being fought around them every day.
Yeah. So much for an unseen war. Alright, so as I cover most of the broken parts of the plot, let's get down to another drawback that I find quizzical yet somewhat unintentionally hilarious, which is the execution of the dialogue. You will hear exactly 3 kinds of dialogue during the course of I, Frankenstein. First of all, you would have the shaky, stilted overloads of exposition being spoon-fed to the audience without any level of authenticity. And it's also executed in a sense where you can easily predict what is going to happen later on down the road. Secondly, you would have the unintentionally hilarious dialogue because despite the fact that everything is said with a straight face and taken 100% seriously, as is a lot of stuff in this movie, you would have dialogue so bad and said with a straight face that you cannot help but laugh.
I've come to destroy you. And this place, the Gargoyle Order, must survive, and mankind with it.
You know, you have to give Aaron Eckhart, he definitely knows how to make something out of nothing. And speaking of which, the final and my personal favorite kind of dialogue, the cheesy yet awesome one-liners delivered by Aaron freaking Eckhart.
Remember, I have no soul.
God will surely damn you.
He already did.
Now that I've finished sharing a slice of the dialogue, let's move on to the performances of this movie. And while there are a couple of outliers, mainly like 1 or 2 people who aren't so good, no one in this movie does a particularly bad job. Even if I find it peculiar and baffling by the entire direction for these actors to project this hokey dialogue with absolute sincerity. Let's take a stab at the main character, shall we? Aside from the unintentional two-face affectation, Aaron Eckhart does remarkable as Adam. And for a good actor like him to inhabit the monstrous, reclusive nature of Frankenstein's monster, he immerses himself into the role without having to oversell or exaggerate his performance. However, as much as I commend Aaron Eckhart for being committed into this project and what he brings to the character, there's no way I can continue talking about this guy without mentioning the elephant in the room. You know what I'm about to say, and this is gonna sound weird, but just bear with me. Frankenstein's monster is too freaking sexy. Aaron Eckhart, under all those stitches and makeup, looks like a scarred up badass, like a Marine veteran or a daredevil expert, and in no way looks like a creature brought to life in a laboratory. It felt like a business decision as a way to make Frankenstein's monster look good looking, much like the same way that the Underworld movies in Twilight made vampires and Kate Beckinsale sexy. And that's a compliment to Aaron Eckhart, since you can recognize he trained so much for the fight scenes and got jacked for the role. However, I think it would have been a much more suitable filmmaking decision had the makeup artist maybe discolored the monster, or added flesh and components to his skin to make it look like it was composed from other bodies.
I'm a dozen used parts from 8 different corpses. I'm a monster.
Right, and I'm a model for GQ magazine. Apart from that, the character job for Adam isn't all too bad. The script does more for the main protagonist aside from making a broody, snarling, and violent vigilante with a character arc that is kinda adequate. He disassociates himself from humanity since the events of the original book and doesn't really care about anybody else aside from his own intentions, only to figure out his purpose of existence, choosing to fight for good and giving humanity that wronged him so long ago a second chance, thus gaining a soul of his own. Not the most innovative thing to write in the world, but it matches the character at least. The second actor, despite obviously doing this for a paycheck, that is the only one chewing the scenery effortlessly is Bill Nighy as Prince Nibirius. Instead of playing the vampire elder in Underworld named Victor, he is now commanding the role of one of the Dark Lords of Hell. And he is selling the hell out of his role, and he doesn't give a damn if he's phoning it in or hamming it up. When he's delivering his monologues or scolding his minions, he projects such devilish charisma and sliminess into almost every line. He's the only actor in this movie who recognizes the kind of film he's in and knows how to have fun with this character, apart from everyone who plays everything straight-faced and sincere. And of all the actors who are playing things straight-faced and sincere, Miranda Otto as Leonore stands above the rest and is perhaps the only actress in the movie movie who can pull off her lines believably with authority and weight to the situation. If you're trying to cast someone who is wanting to play a position of power as earnestly as possible, this is why you hire an experienced actress like Miranda Otto, who was played Éowyn in Lord of the Rings. Because when she spells out exposition to the audience or makes decisions on her own, you believe her and her motivations to perpetuate her colony's survival with what little numbers that they have. As for secondary actors, Yvonne Strahovski is actually miscast as the electrophysiologist who helps Adam on his journey. Whereas Miranda Otto delivers her dialogue in a way that makes you believe her character, the opposite is applied to Yvonne Strahovski, and it has nothing to do with the actress, because performance-wise, she does a great job. It's really the casting. In her resume, she has taken the roles of being an attractive spy on the show Chuck, and an attractive serial killer on the show Dexter. And in I, Frankenstein, she's playing the role as the attractive scientist. And you buy it just about as well as Denise Richards playing a nuclear physicist in a James Bond movie. Any line Strahovski spouts, whether it be about scientific or mythological jargon, you're just like, girl, you ain't no scientist. Not to say that there aren't some attractive female scientists out there, just not like this. You believe it about as well as believing that Jai Courtney is an actor. In which case, his fight sequences and his muscles do a far better job performing than he honestly does with his British accent. And during the review, I've also mentioned Zuriel, who is played by Socrates Otto, not related to Miranda Otto, and he does a fairly good job in the movie for what he is given. But what makes me slap my forehead, followed by a process of cracking up repeatedly, is that this guy, who is supposed to be the commander of one of Nibirius's legions, is terrible at his job. For example, he's supposed to be following Tara because she is the only one who can make sense of the journal to Frankenstein's monster, figuring out his true purpose of existence. Here's what happens. I can't make this up if I tried. This demon commander is stealthy enough to get on the exact same tram station that Tara is on and is following directly behind her, but when she makes a mad dash for the corner, he loses her. He's also stated that he's been searching for the creature for the better part of 200 years, learning about its motives and locations. If that's the case, then much like how we sent hundreds or so demons all the way to the Gargoyles Cathedral, while also saying that our casualties will be high but necessary, why doesn't he, instead of sending out 3 or 4 demons to capture him 200 years ago, why not 10? Why not 15? 20? 50. It would have been easier since Adam, by happenstance, decided to go alone in the wilderness without a gargoyle to protect him. You're the commander of one of the 666 legions of hell, and this is the best you can do for your heir? But just when you thought that the storyline was enough to persuade you to watch this movie and realize how cartoonishly silly it is, let's linger on over to the visual effects. I, Frankenstein's special effects are... what's the word? Bad. Sure, the gargoyles themselves look adequate, despite them all looking almost identical, and them transforming back into human and ascending to heaven when they die look cool and all, but the most glaringly obvious effect is when the demons are descending to hell after being killed. When a demon dies by Adam or from the gargoyle's hands, its spirit spews out as a fireball and plows all the way through the ground, basically going back to hell. In some instances, it looks solid, but when you see them in slow motion in particular shots, it looks like a PlayStation 3 graphic. The compositing is ghastly apparent, and sometimes, especially in medium or close-up shots, you can see the pixels around the effect. Little did I realize that after listening to the director's commentary, even though the movie's budget is $65 million, the visual effects budget was $6 million. And it's the same because, much like the visual effects, the worst part of the makeup also involved the demons. I have no problem with the design and details that are put on the demons, but here's the snag. There's hardly any embellishment to them. Everything from the horns to the teeth to the spikes is all covered by latex prosthetics. And no matter how many times they try to gloss it, make it shiny, it still looks like an expensive Halloween mask. I remember this. When I saw Kevin Graveau's demon form for the first time, alongside Aaron Eckhart's unintentional reaction where he just basically goes, "Seriously? That's what you look like?" I laughed so hard. It wasn't made or intentionally made to be funny, but hey, it made me laugh, and that's the spirit of a guilty pleasure. Now, as much fun as it is to talk about how fascinatingly silly and goofy the plot of I, Frankenstein is, and how every other element, whether it's taken seriously, is interpreted as being unintentionally goofy, there are several things in I, Frankenstein that are actually done exceptionally well that I have to give kudos to, much like the acting. And this time, I don't mean it out of a sense of mockery. Much like the Underworld films, I, Frankenstein may not be robust with its storytelling. However, the action scenes are what compensate for some of the script's issues. Apart from Underworld's action scenes where they are dimly lit and feature a bunch of shaky cam, especially during the close quarter combat scenes, I, Frankenstein improves upon them by scaling back on the close-ups and featuring more medium and wide shots, allowing the viewer to take in on the action. The majority of them, like the first battle sequence, and even that Kali Exkrima stick fight between Adam and Zuriel, are surprisingly well choreographed. And you can imagine the level of effort and Filipino martial arts training to make these action scenes possible. The other commendable element that really astounds me is how bizarrely stunning it is with its cinematography. Ross Emery is the DOP for I, Frankenstein, who previously worked on the Underworld movies, and with his work for here, it is simply remarkable. For an inexpensive movie like this, the storyboarding is insane. At any angle, at any time, at whatever scene is taking place, he takes full advantage of it. Examples like swooping shots over the cathedral, whether it be during an establishing shot or during an action scene. Another particularly awesome shot where the camera zooms through the fiery carnage as the demons and gargoyles collide. And the trailer shot, I'm not gonna lie, it's one of my favorite shots of any movie ever. I don't know why. Maybe it's because of how beautiful the spectacle is while being shot through a artistic, immaculate wide shot of the demons being killed by the gargoyles and Adam walking towards Nibirius' lair to go kill him like a badass in slow motion. I love it. Whether intentional for the IMAX 3D experience or not, it was still a very wise decision for the filmmakers to take. While I did mention the bargain basement visual effects, the production design, while appearing cheap in some instances, isn't too shabby aside from abandoned apartment complexes and warehouses. The most notable effort that you see within the sets are the ones that take place in the Gargoyle stronghold. The production crew does a pretty swell job at creating the evangelical, gothic halls, rooms, weaponry, bunkers, and a bunch of them, whether they're a CG background or a practical set, have a bunch of quality detail. And the score by Australian composers Johnny Klimek and Reinhold Heil, it's shocking how outstanding it is. There's the opening track with Lisa Gerrard's glorious performance, a great number that happens during the demon siege on the Gargoyles base, and perhaps my favorite cut, Rite of the Gargoyles, in which it starts off with a very dreading, somber mood, setting the stakes, and then proceeds to build up until it peaks with a glorious melody from the choir, and the woodwinds and percussion do the rest. Before we wrap things up nicely, while it is fun to talk about the positives and the negatives, I also want to go into things that the film can improve upon more to turn it from not only being such an enjoyable movie, but into something that is just a very good movie. There is potential for a film like this, and if it benefited from a much improved script, we would have had a much better version of the movie. First of all, strengthen the development up for some of the characters. One of the examples that I can think of off the top of my head would have to be the relationship between Adam and the young gargoyle warriors Ophir and Keziah. Since these two are the first gargoyles that Adam has really known over the course of his life, it would have been much better had the acquaintanceship between Adam, Ophir, and Keziah grow further with such better character development. Here's an example. Have them help out Adam a couple times, even talk with him about the ways of life that he didn't understand from his master. Even somewhere down the road, let them have a shaky relationship between them and Gideon. Have him forbid the two from trying to accompany him anymore. Unless they tell anyone about it, he would basically banish them and make them a fallen angel. It would provide them with both a moral dilemma and a conflicted relationship with Adam, and it'll reinforce more depth and villainy to Gideon, who, despite fighting for the human race and the Gargoyle Order, grows seething hatred towards Adam and sees him as nothing more than a monster with no salvation or redemption, no matter how much good he does. Also, if Adam's desire is to be loved and to find acceptance from the human race, let us see more of that. Show Adam trying to help someone out only to be rejected by his looks, or even have him accidentally hurt someone. Even extend the opening monologue of the early years of his life. That way, it would make the payoff of Adam thanking Tara to be much more impactful, as opposed to us trying to fill in the blanks because of a novel that we read. In a film that takes itself so gritty and seriously, let's try adding a little bit more humor into the mix. Have characters acknowledge how ridiculous the war sounds. Let the filmmakers embrace the premise and have fun with it. There was a glimpse of it, such as Tara's first reaction to her first demon encounter where it's transforming right in front of her eyes, but other than that, there isn't much else humor or awareness to make audiences feel a part of the adventure, unless unintentional. Maybe something that pokes at Adam's fear of fire. Have him have a hilarious reaction towards it, and you can follow that up with cause and effect, character development, and him learning from others that he didn't learn from Victor. And finally, let me ask this one question to the directors, producers, and writers. Why does this movie need to take place 200 years later? No, seriously, why did the story have to place this iconic literature movie monster into modern times? I understand to a modicum that this decision was made to appeal to the underworld demographic, but here's an idea to help the film embrace its concept even better. Why not have it take place in the 19th century, just like the promotional comic, where there's gothic castles with lords of different parts of Europe, gigantic battles or sieges with a sense of scale, and the demons look like actual demons with a sense of variety to them. Some having wings, others on foot, even ones with their own set of weapons. That would make them much more of an imaginative appearance than them having to look like, well, the target audience for Black Veil Brides. I, Frankenstein is a Shakespearean accomplishment of cinema that shall not be forgotten. Critically, its script is frivolous, contradictory, and has all the boxes checked for an unintentionally funny, so bad it's good flick. However, if this was given to the right kind of filmmakers with a much improved script that feels monstrously satisfying rather than feeling like a generic underworld ripoff, I believe that this is the kind of movie that could be remade into a much better version. Who knows? I could remake it. There are copious levels of potential for a film like this, but what we have is what we have. Nothing but good old guilty pleasure goodness. I, the movie reviewing pyromaniac. I, Luke Nukem, you have been blown away.